Wrapping up the first half of McMurray here, I'm going to try to close it off. So the Rifi Berber identities are conservative, but still oppositional to the Arab identities. Um, and this is absolutely the case many times. I remember once I was in the High Atlas or the Middle Atlas, something like that. I was on my way down in the south, and I stopped at a gas station to fill up. And of course, the young guy at the gas station who's sort of on the I was trying to get to a rave down on the in the desert, and this was, I don't know, about two-thirds of the way there. It was about 3 a.m. and so he comes out, and he's because I was driving there all night, and so he comes out and he's like, oh, he's speaking English to me. I can tell you're an American. I want to welcome you here. I have a home nearby. You can come and spend the night there and meet my family, and we can do traditional things. And I was like, so I responded in Arabic because I'm like, I need to show him that I don't need his help. So I'm speaking Arabic to him, saying, no, I'm fine. Don't worry. I'm traveling through. And he got angry at me. He said, "Why are you speaking Arabic to me? I don't understand that language. I speak Berber and English, of course." He's speaking English the whole time, and I never spoke a word to him in English. It was always in Arabic. But part of that is manufactured anger. You're trying to, if you're selling something to someone, you're trying to create a debt. And so he was trying to make it look like I had been rude to him, so that I would feel sorry for that, and then try to make it up to him by buying whatever he was selling. But part of it was, no, it's an actual legit grievance against the Arabic language that many Berbers feel, and they do not want necessarily to become reliant on Arabic. So you can think of this as similar to Iraq. We were studying Iraq with the Kurdish minority there, and post-colonial Iraq under Saddam, being very heavily Arabized and rejecting the narratives of minorities, Kurdish or otherwise. You can also think about Egypt, right? Post-colonial Egypt, after having driven out the British. Then sort of consolidating down on Islam and Christianity, and rejecting to a certain extent Judaism, especially with Israel as the antagonistic neighbor to the north. So here's a very similar thing going on. There's also separation and radicalization, a little bit here, talking about how once the migrant laborers are living separate from the rest of their society, they then become radicalized. So they if they had stayed in Morocco, and these are the ones who aren't avoiding Islamism but are embracing it. If they stayed in Morocco and they start spouting out these radical ideas, someone could just look at them and, in an ordinary, broad and varied Muslim society, someone could just say, "Hey, wait a minute, that's me you're talking about. You really feel that way?" No. I don't really feel that way about you. I'm just sort of spouting off or whatever. But there's no limit to that when they're the only Muslim or one of 20 Muslims in the whole city. Then they can, just keep going, and there's no one to sort of say, "Hey, wait a minute, it's not as not as clear cut as you think it is." So the radicalization continues on without that community, and we could say the same about Christians as well. Narratives of success and failure, pawns or pioneers, and I want to cut out a lot of this because we're just trying to wrap it up here. Pawns are the structure versus agency. So structure, we're talking about social structure. This is mainly talking about power. So when we have social structure, this is usually at the lowest level, parents disciplining children, friends making fun of each other, or being sort of gentle correctives to one another to change their behavior, all the way up to official sanctions, to arrest, trial, etc. So we're looking at getting fired from your job or whatever because you didn't do what was right. So it's all about the power to coerce or persuade people to change their behavior. The other side of that is agency, the resistance to those attempts to persuade people. So you can stand on the side of those in power and say this is how we have to administer this population, or you can stand on the other side of individual agency and say this is how we have to manipulate and strategize to resist these attempts to make me do something I don't want to do. And so anthropologists have sort of gone back and forth. Mostly, they tend to fall on the side of agency. Sociologists tend to be more on the side of structure. But some anthropologists, especially in Africa, historically were on the side of structured structural functionalists. And that's who's influencing McMurray at first, and then later he's coming back to it when he's writing the book. Sorry, he's admitting that he was a little bit too much on the side of structure as pawns, and now he wants to see them more on the side of agency. But we have both. We have both, the stories of both. So there's family support involved. When we think of ourselves as immigrants, like our grandparents or great grandparents or great great grandparents were, for me it was my ancestors in the 1880s. When they came across, they had to have family support. So they didn't just come alone, right? They came, and they didn't come to nothing, right? They came to a family member, a cousin, a distant cousin, an uncle, somebody who's living somewhere already, has already done it. And it's the same for these people. They have relatives living in Europe. They have powerful friends who are lending them money, helping them get the paperwork done, the various visas and work permits they have to get. So there's a lot of structure involved in that agency. Yazid, I'm not sure exactly who Yazid was. I tried to look it up and I couldn't. But the story of the trip from Fez to Tetuan and back, that was a fun one. I was in Fez and trying to get to a music concert in Tetuan, and there were a couple of others of us doing that as well. And so we got a grand taxi. We rode with, I don't know, we bought the whole back seat. It was like three of us across the back. No, it was just two of us in the back seat, and then two more people in the front. We each paid a double ticket and got up to Tetuan and had our concert. And a third guy had taken a bus, Mario. He's a Spanish guy. His ancestors were from Italy, but he had an Italian name. But he was from Tarifa, and spent every summer in Morocco because he would rent his home to down in here to British tourists every summer, and make so much money from that he could live off the money. So he took a bus up, and then he was like, "Yeah, that was terrible. I should have taken the grand taxi." So we went to get a grand taxi back to Fez, and it cost twice as much. And we were like, "Why?" And they said, "Oh, it's because it's a different color taxi. So the taxi coming from Fez was a Fezi taxi, and Fez is this. It was a site of power. These are the people who control the economy. People in Fez and people who used to be in Fez." Because that's where the king lived in the 1950s before moving the capital to Rabat. But coming from Tetuan, everyone assumes you're a drug smuggler and a reefy sort of bandit and brigand. So it costs a lot more. And I was like, "What's going on?" And we got somewhere down in here, and there was a checkpoint set up. It was the Royal Police, the scary guys with they have the Uzis and Moto Guzzi, Italian. Motorcycles and just really top shelf equipment, and they stop us, and he gets out, the driver gets out and goes around to the back and pops the trunk, and then Mario, who's in the front seat, me and the other guy were in the back, Mario's in the front seat, he turns around, he's a little short guy, and he looks between the trunk going up and the back of the car. You can sort of see he's giving him money. You're like, well, of course he's giving him money. It's a bribe. That's the whole point. That's why you pay double, was because you're paying that extra for all the bribes he has to pay, because he's not going to bring down a taxi on his own all the way from the reef where the drugs come from. This is where another friend of mine was out. He was in, I think he went to El Hoceima, so he was out in here somewhere and just driving by in a rental car. And looked to his left, and there was 15 acres of marijuana growing, and he was like, "Wow!" So he just had to stop the car and go out and stand in the middle of it because he was a big smoker, and just sort of raise his hands to the heavens and dream. But anyway, so they're not going to come from Tetuan down to Fez without bringing a package along for someone, which means because you got to make even more money. So presumably we were in a bad situation, but the driver paid his paid his bribes like he should have, and we arrived with no problems. But anyway, so there's a lot of smuggling going on. Goodness, one more video, and we're out of here. 10:39. Okay.